have larger seeds work very well at direct seeding. Biggest problem I see with people in direct seeding is they get the hoe out there and they make this trench 3 inches deep. As a general rule, a seed needs to be buried in the ground about 2 times its diameter. How big is most flower seed? You know, a 1/16 inch. We're dealing, it needs to be under the ground about 1/8 of an inch, not deep. If you have a heavier clay soil, you might want to come in and cover the seed not with the soil there, but with sand or vermiculite. Does 2 different things. It doesn't crust over like some of the clay soils, but also after a couple of rains, you go out there a week after you planted, you're going, okay, I know I planted flowers somewhere, but the whole garden is green with weeds. At least the row of vermiculite tells you that the flowers should be. But it doesn't crust. That's the big thing. And those little seedlings can get their heads up out of it. When they're just seeded, we need to put frequent light waterings on. We want to just keep that top of the soil moist to allow the seeds to swell and germinate. Then as they grow, we want to spread out those waterings and get them water more of the root zone. Once we get them up to a size with 2 or 3 true leaves on, we need to thin them out. That might be just pulling out the smaller ones, getting proper spacing. The seed packet's going to give you, or the book, reference books are going to give you that proper spacing. You know, some of them are pretty good, and some of them might take, 12 inches apart, depending on the plant. So, but we need to thin them. If we don't thin them, they'll be weak, spindly plants and produce very few blooms.
Always try to start the moonflower vines.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I buy the seed.
Yeah.
And they're always so hard, and I either soak them or I'll try to scratch them.
Yep.
And last year I tried it twice and none of them
Certain
grew.
varieties or plants are very hard to get them started. They have that hard seed coat. We deal with that more with perennials than annuals. A lot of our annual seed is already treated, but if we're collecting it ourselves, it becomes an issue. I always use an example of okra seed. I know it's not a flower, but it's a vegetable. Has a very hard seed coat. You have to take a file and literally file that seed coat down to allow the moisture into the seed to germinate. And I haven't tried the moon vines, but I suspect the way you're saying it, it's the same type of seed.
I mean, I've done it for like 5 years, and this last year was the first year I didn't get in.
And it could be that you just didn't have viable seed, that you purchased. It might have been a bad seed year, germination might have been down, something of that
Now,
nature.
do you know, like when you soak those type of seeds,
Mhm.
some will go to the bottom and some will float? Is there a difference?
I don't think that
on
has any indication on vitality
Well, some
of
will
the seed.
swell.
Yeah. Yeah, if they do not swell, that's an indication that they're not absorbing that moisture in. That could be that the seed is dead, and so it's not taking in the moisture, or that the seed coat is so hard that it's not, and those are the ones that you might need to take out and take a file, a nail file, or garage file.
Should you just soak them like 1 or 2 days?
24 hours
Okay.
is typically.
They don't do anything after 24 hours.
24 hours, they've absorbed enough water that if they're gonna germinate, they're gonna swell and germinate.
How, the seeds have dates, like if you go to Walgreens and pick up a packet of marigold?
They've all been tested, and they all have seed lots and dates on them. So that's another thing, good question, is if you're finding, at the garden center or the drugstore or somewhere, they got a basket of seed over here that's really, really cheap, look at the date. It might be last year's, it might be 2 years. And state law says it's supposed to be tested and labeled for the year that it's being sold. So.
But if you have old seeds, will they sometime? Probably a guess.
There is shelf life of seed, and it depends on how it's been stored. Humidity, temperature, cool, dark location, it's going to have a longer lifespan. It also depends on the species. Some seed 1 year is it. It's not, other seed, you can store it for 4 or 5 years and it will be fine. And it's just the difference of variety.
Question.
Mhm.
In a grow room, can you speak to use of humidity domes?
Yeah, humid, I'm not sure whether I know exactly what you're talking about, but.
Plastic cover?
Cut plastic cover.
Over the tray.
We want to keep humidity up in those, around those plants. On the other side of the coin, we don't want to get it too high or you have fungus issues. If you've ever dealt with growing plants damping off where you wake up one morning and half the little plants are dead. That's a fungus issue. That's based on too much humidity, too much moisture around that plant. So there's a fine line there of having enough humidity and having too much. If it's an open area, humidity domes or the plastic covers are probably going to help that first growing cycle of getting the seeds germinated and getting them up. If you've got an enclosed grow room where you've got the humidity up anywhere in there, probably not seeing quite the benefit that you would in an open, having the grow chamber and the lights in the corner of the dining room.
60 to 70% humidity
Yes. Mm-hmm.
throughout until
Throughout.
you harden them off?
Yeah.
On soaking seeds, I was reading something the other day, it was talking about not just putting seeds in water, but using like damp towels because the seeds need oxygen, and if you put them in water, they can drown.
Yeah. If you have them in there 24 hours or less, not going to be an issue. That's why we want to keep them in there less than 24 hours. Because yes, seeds are living plants. They have to have oxygen. They respire just like we do. So, yeah. So, but typically 24 hours or less, not a real big issue. Okay, we got them in the ground. We're growing them. What do we do with them now? Watering. Inch to inch and a half of water a week. We want to put it on slowly so it waters the top 6 to 8 inches of soil where that root zone is. Going to take the best way is some type of sprinkler or trickle irrigation. Watering a flower bed with a garden hose and a trigger sprayer is probably not recommended because it puts that water on too fast. We've all done it. We've all watered and had the water running down our feet, down the drive, into the street. That water doesn't do anything for us running down the street.
Especially when you forget to turn it off.
Yeah. So we want to put the water on slowly, sprinkle, trickle, the ooze hose, the black rubber hose that the water just beads up around. Take those and snake them through the water bed. We're going to talk about mulching. Put the mulch on top of that. Leave the end out. Put a quick connect on it. When you need to water, connect the hose, turn it on. All that water goes down into the soil. We keep the foliage and the flowers dry. We cut down on disease problems, fungus problems, things of that nature. So inch and a half a week.
Where does one purchase a pressure reducer for that garden hose? Because the water lines from, out in the country
Yeah.
where I live, they can be 143 pounds
Yes.
of pressure on them.
Most plumbing supply places should have some of some type. Now, it might take a little bit of plumbing ingenuity to get it to go to a garden hose fitting,
Yeah.
but they should have those
Okay.
pressure reducers.
You can go to an RV store and they got pressure reducers.
Okay,
Just
Okay.
screw on the hose.
Cunningham Campers is on Highway 62. It's been
there,
really
there you go. See, I learn something all the time.
Bring it down to about 40 pounds or 50 pounds.
Okay, RV stores, camper stores.
Yeah.
Are there different quality soaker hoses? Because I've had a lot of pressure in
And as with everything else, typically you get what you pay for. I hate to say that you need to spend some money on some of this stuff, but sometimes the cheap stuff doesn't last. And my biggest example of all this would be pruners. Buy a good pair of pruners, keep them, clean them, and only keep them in your hand, don't loan them out a whole lot. And a good pair of pruners will last you for a long, long time. Same way with good hose, good garden tools, you take care of them, they will last you. Pinching, you know, some of our plants tend to just shoot up one stem, one stalk. We need to come in and pinch that out. We remove the apical dominance. We allow the side lateral buds to break. The more branches you have, the more stems you have, the more blooms you're going to have. So things like impatiens, coleus, things of that nature, very readily benefit from pinching. You get the side branching. A lot of our varieties we have now are what I call self-branching. They're shorter varieties, they're denser varieties, bushier varieties of annuals than what we had 30 plus years ago. Deadheading, as you go through the season, that plant's goal is to bloom, get pollinated, produce seeds, and pass those genetic traits on to the next generation. If you come in and you keep removing these spent heads, these dead heads, that plant will keep, as a general rule, will keep producing more flowers. Some not as much as others, but typically most of them, they start looking a little shabby. You can prune them back and reinvigorate them. Thing to remember, just don't come in and pull the petals off, because the thing I see done that way is petunias. You know, that trumpet-shaped petals will twist up when it dries up. You come in, grab a hold of it, pull it off. Well, you left the whole base here with the seed in it. You have done nothing about deadheading that petunia. You need to come back in and really pull that whole head off, trim it off, prune it off, whatever.
That picture there, it's actually taken quite a bit.
They're coming down pretty far. And there's times that you need to do that, but most of the time just, cutting here so you get rid of this dead stem is all that's necessary. Staking, typically not a real issue with most of our annuals. We'll talk more about staking with perennials. Might need to come in mid-season and top dress with half pound of nitrogen or so per 1,000 square feet. Every month, every 6 weeks, things of that nature. What I'm going to say about insect and disease control is kind of the same thing that we tell our farmers that we talk to. Get out there and scout your fields. Get out there, look at your flower bed. Disease problems, insect problems are easier to take care of when they're just starting than when they've taken over the whole flower bed. Get out there, look around, turn leaves over, see what's out there. You see a problem, sometimes if it's isolated, a disease is isolated to one plant, sometimes it's just best to pull that one plant out, dispose of it in the garbage, replace it, or a lot of times it'll just fill in instead of letting that disease spread to the whole garden. So keep an eye on it, start early, it's a lot easier to control. Yes, there are fungicides, insecticides, but as a general rule, I typically don't like to recommend those to homeowners. A couple of things. One, flower beds are typically not one variety, one species out there. They're typically not all marigolds. They're a mixture of multiple things. Sometimes it gets difficult to find products that can be applied to all those plants that are out there. So, again, keep an eye on it. Take care of it early. Weed control, start off a clean bed. 1 inch of organic mulch will take care of most of weed problems in a flower bed, unless they're perennials that have a root system down there already. As I said before, in a flower bed, this is your best option. Pulling them out while they're small, pulling the weeds out. Herbicides, there's pre-emergent type of products that are usable in flower beds. These are the preen type products. You have to have the bed prepared, put the flowers in, put the mulch in, and then sprinkle this granular product on the ground. It has to make a barrier. It prevents all seeds from germinating, so it can only be used on established plants or transplants, not directly seeded. You know, once the directed seeded flowers are up and growing, preen's okay. But, yeah. And you cannot go out there and start digging around in the flower bed once you have the pre-emergent on, because you'll break that barrier and the weeds will come up through.
The late great Fred Wishy always talked about 7 dust. Would you recommend that?
For weed control?
Well,
Oh.
for, I guess, disease or insects.
Insect control, yep. 7 is a good one for home gardens, but 7 is not nearly as effective today as what it was 30 years ago. Because most of us used 7 dust for anything that creeped and crawled in our garden. And we basically were running a selective breeding program for things that were resistant to 7. Same way that we've done with Roundup. We're getting weeds resistant to Roundup. Okay. But there are some post control methods, herbicides, grass begone, things of that nature. Anything post, well, pre-emergence also. Make sure that everything you have in that garden flower bed is on the label and is legal to use that product around. Preen, there are certain plants, certain species that preen will kill in the flowers family. Ajuga, bugleweed, you want to get rid of ground cover, put preen down in the plant bed, and you can pretty well clean out ajuga out of the. Is that a recommended method? Absolutely not. But it's just wanting to know that, make sure everything is on the label before you use it. End of the season, remove that stuff, that dead material. If it's been healthy most of the season, put it in the compost pile. If it's not been healthy, you know you have an insect or disease problem, put it in the garbage. You don't want to get it into the compost pile and just recycle that disease problem into next year. Cultivate your beds, get more organic matter in, more dry leaves from the fall, till those in, anything that you can do to get organic matter in there. Common mistakes. You know, poor preparation, poor choice of location, squeezing way too many plants in there. Remember, those plants are going to grow throughout the growing season. This is always a big one. It's a lot of fun to get out there in April and May and do gardening. When it comes July and August, something about that thrill just isn't there for most of us. So put in what you can take care of. And we already talked about getting out there too early in the spring. Any questions on annuals? Yeah.
I've had trouble before with marigolds that grow a lot of green but don't bloom. Is that, do they take different food than regular annuals?
Shouldn't take anything different. I would have to look at them and see if there's something else going on around. Are they in full sun? Sometimes plants won't bloom if they're not in full sun.
You know, one will sprout up in the driveway on its own and it'll bloom in no time.
Yeah.
Like this big one over here that's all green with no bloom.
And some of that might be variety types. Yeah, that they just take a longer growing season to bloom. You know, especially if they're the ones producing a large plant with a large bloom head on it.
And then I guess maybe a seed could get mixed up.
Yeah, and it's kind of the same thing that I've talked about with garden equipment. You get what you pay for. A lot of times, and I'm pretty cheap myself, so yeah, a lot of times those cheaper seeds might not be as pure or the labeled variety technically that they say they are too. So, you know, buying quality seeds from a quality seed house typically solves a lot of problems along those lines. Okay, what do we have? Oh,
Do you recommend deadheading for all of the?
as a general rule, yes. Because if nothing else, just for attractiveness in the garden, getting those spent heads off and cleaning them up.
And what if you want to,
If you're wanting
the
the same
seeds.
seeds, then you can't deadhead.
Okay.
You gotta
you gotta let them go?
let them go and mature. And that's a sacrifice that you have to make. If you're knowing you want to collect seeds, then you know that you're not gonna have the full bloom show all season long.
Until later in the season, and then
You
let
can.
them-
But depending on the species,
Yeah.
some of them still take quite a long time to mature. Yep.
Yep, you're good. For a break, guys, I have about 7:15, so be back here about 7:30.
Everybody get up and stretch.
Yeah.